Between 1961 and 1973, over 100 people walked into a German compound in rural Chile and were never seen again, and the man running it claimed he'd done nothing wrong. The record shows that in 1961, a charismatic German physician named Paul Schäfer arrived in southern Chile with approximately 250 followers. They'd purchased land in the remote Mole region, about 250 kilometers south of Santiago, and began constructing what they called Colonia Dignidad, Dignity Colony. On the surface, it appeared to be a self-sufficient agricultural community built on Christian principles. But the walls that surrounded the compound told a different story. What exactly happened behind those barriers? Paul Schäfer had fled Germany in 1961 under circumstances the record describes as suspicious. He'd faced accusations of child abuse in his home country, though he denied them all. In Chile, he reinvented himself as a healer and spiritual guide. The colony attracted German immigrants seeking community, families wanting a fresh start, and those drawn to Schäfer's charismatic preaching. By the mid-1960s, Colonia Dignidad had grown into a small city unto itself, complete with schools, hospitals, farms, and workshops. But former residents would later describe something far darker than any brochure could suggest. What did life inside the colony actually look like? Survivors' testimonies paint a picture of systematic control. Residents worked without wages. Children were separated from parents and placed in dormitories. Schäfer exercised absolute authority over medical decisions, sexual relationships, and daily movement. The record documents that dissent was met with punishment, beatings, isolation, and psychological manipulation. Some colonists attempted escape. Most were captured and returned. Those who questioned Schäfer's rule or his increasingly erratic behavior faced consequences that remain unclear. But between 1961 and the early 1970s, something more sinister unfolded. Where did the missing people go? The Chilean government didn't investigate Colonia Dignidad until the mid-1970s, long after the worst period had passed. When authorities finally gained access, they found no bodies, no mass graves, no physical evidence of the disappearances residents had reported. Schäfer claimed all missing persons had simply left the colony and returned to Germany or elsewhere. The record shows no documentation of their departures, no forwarding addresses, no contact with family members who claimed to have last seen them alive inside the compound. Investigators faced a puzzle. How do you prosecute a crime when the victim leaves no trace? One case stands out in the files. A young German girl named Sylvia Meyer entered the colony in the 1960s. Her family later reported her missing. The record indicates she was last seen inside Colonia Dignidad. When asked about her whereabouts, Schäfer offered no coherent explanation. No letter arrived from Sylvia, no passport stamp, no record of her ever leaving Chile. She simply vanished. Her case, like dozens of others, remains unsolved. But there's one detail that investigators couldn't ignore: the colony's underground bunker system. What was being hidden beneath the surface? When authorities finally examined the compound's infrastructure, they discovered a network of underground rooms and passages. The record documents torture equipment, medical apparatus, and isolation cells. Former residents testified that Schäfer had imprisoned people in these bunkers, some for weeks, others for months. The bunkers served multiple purposes: punishment, medical experimentation, and according to some survivors' accounts, something worse. But the bunkers had been cleaned thoroughly. Any physical evidence connecting them to the disappearances had been systematically removed. How much damage can be erased in the name of institutional secrecy? The Chilean military government of the 1970s and 1980s complicated matters further. General Augusto Pinochet's regime had little interest in investigating a German compound that, however brutal internally, posed no political threat to the state. The record shows that Pinochet's secret police actually used Colonia Dignidad as a detention and torture site during the dictatorship, partnering with Schäfer to hold political prisoners. This alliance created a perverse protection. The colony remained largely untouched by meaningful law enforcement scrutiny for decades. Who was protecting whom and why? Paul Schäfer himself remained elusive. He evaded arrest through the 1980s and 1990s, even as more survivors came forward with testimonies. The record indicates he fled Chile in 1989, just as the dictatorship was collapsing. He resurfaced in Argentina, then Paraguay, always one step ahead of justice. Schäfer maintained his innocence in every jurisdiction, claiming persecution and misunderstanding. Survivors described a man who'd cultivated total authority through a combination of ideology, isolation, and violence. But the legal system struggled to prove what happened to the missing. Testimony alone, without bodies or forensic evidence, rarely secured convictions. Did Schäfer ever face real accountability? In 2005, Argentine authorities finally arrested Paul Schäfer in Buenos Aires. The record shows he was extradited to Chile in 2006 to face charges of child abuse and human trafficking. By then, he was 74 years old and in declining health. He was convicted and sentenced to prison, but the disappearances remained officially unsolved. Schäfer died in prison in 2010 without ever revealing what became of those missing colonists. His death closed one chapter, but left dozens of cases permanently open. The colony itself was dissolved in 1991 after Pinochet's fall from power. The property was seized by the Chilean government. Survivors began to speak publicly, and their accounts grew more consistent. People had disappeared into the bunkers and never emerged. Some survivors suggested mass graves existed in remote areas surrounding the compound, though none have been confirmed by excavation. The record only shows that between 60 and 100 individuals entered Colonia Dignidad and were never documented as leaving. What happened to them remains one of South America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Forensic teams have searched portions of the surrounding land, but vast areas remain unexplored. The Chilean government has been reluctant to authorize large-scale excavations, citing cost and the passage of time. Some relatives of the missing still believe their loved ones are buried somewhere on or near the compound. Others have accepted that the truth may never surface. The record shows that Colonia Dignidad operated as a closed system where external accountability simply didn't exist. Schäfer's death in 2010 eliminated the only person who might have provided answers. And so the question remains: over 100 people entered and vanished. Their names are documented. Their fates are not. The case of Colonia Dignidad reveals something deeper than one man's cruelty. It exposes how isolation, ideology, and institutional complicity can create spaces where people simply disappear. The Chilean government's inaction during the dictatorship, the colony's self-sufficiency, and Schäfer's absolute control combined to produce a perfect environment for exploitation. When the system finally closed, the evidence had already been erased. Survivors gave testimony. Authorities found torture rooms. But without bodies, without forensic proof, without Schäfer's confession, the missing remain officially missing. Their cases sit in files, unsolved and cold. Today, Colonia Dignidad stands partially preserved as a memorial and museum. Survivors' groups continue to advocate for new investigations and for excavation permits that might finally answer where the missing are buried. The record shows that at least 3 former colonists have filed complaints with Chilean authorities requesting renewed searches. But decades have passed. Evidence degrades, memories fade, and the compound's secrets, if they were ever fully known, died with Paul Schäfer. The question posed at the beginning, how do over 100 people vanish without trace, has only one answer. When nobody's watching and the walls are high enough, disappearance becomes possible. And when those who hold the keys die before speaking, it becomes permanent. Subscribe for more unsolved disappearances that official records still can't explain. New cases.